What's up, Mazda fans? This is a quick video review of the CorkSport performance motor mount for the 2014 and up Mazda 3s. I've got this one installed on a 2014 Mazda 3 iSport with the 6-speed manual transmission. Anything that I say here should apply pretty well to the other performance motor mounts in the market. JBR and some other companies offer a comparable product. I just went with this one because it was on clearance. I think that the stock motor mounts are a major weak point in these cars from the factory. I've already got the part installed on the car, so I've got the stock one here in the box, and I really can't overstate how soft this stock motor mount is, and I think that I'll be able to kind of illustrate that by pulling it out here. Should have planned ahead for this. So you can kind of see that the stock mount is really only anchored to the steel in two places. Everywhere else there's an air gap, and that's a pretty soft, malleable rubber too. It's not hard like the urethane that they use on the performance motor mount. You can get in here and you can kind of move the thing around. When it was mounted to the engine, you could move the entire engine around without too much effort. There really is a lot of give in this thing. It's fairly mushy. It's also heavy. It's extremely heavy compared to the CorkSport model. Not that I really think that a few pounds of weight savings will amount to much, but it's certainly something. So I sort of found out with the stock motor mount, I had it in there for a solid 3 years, and you can learn to shift well with this motor mount, but you have to kind of learn how it behaves. And I like to think of it as like if the engine was mounted on kind of a rubber band. That's sort of what you have to think about with this stock motor mount. When you want to take off quickly in first gear, you have to release the clutch fast to sort of preload the motor mount, and then you want to push the clutch back into the friction zone once that motor mount's loaded, so that it doesn't bog the engine. And it takes it's a difficult thing to get right. And then when you shift between gears, especially the lower gears, you want to ride the friction zone longer than you really think is necessary to give this motor mount time to settle. And then particularly when you downshift, you really want to ride the friction zone, and you want to try to rev match as well as possible, because if you don't, the whole engine will lurch and the car will lurch too, and it actually can be pretty bad at times. So you can get good at shifting with this motor mount, but it's a difficult thing to do, and none of those problems apply whatsoever to the CorkSport motor mount. It's much stiffer. If you can shift well with this thing, you can shift really well with the CorkSport model, and even if you don't shift perfectly every single time, you won't see the kind of issues that you see with this motor mount. There just won't be any lurching. If you downshift with the CorkSport motor mount and you don't rev match well, and you don't ride the friction zone long enough, pretty quickly the engine just bumps up to the right RPM, and there's no big no vehicle lurching or anything like that. So all in all, the CorkSport motor mount really improves the driving experience. It's much easier to shift well, and I find it much more enjoyable to drive this car. When it's moving, at least, with the CorkSport motor mount. Now with anything, there's always upsides and downsides. Certainly Mazda designed it this way for a reason, and the vibrations, at least at idle, are really considerable with the CorkSport motor mount. So I'm going to be starting it up here in a few moments and showing you guys that, but before I do, just to kind of describe ahead of time, it really seems like these engines have a resonance, or at least the engine in my specific car seems to have a resonance right around 900 RPM. I haven't plugged in a reader or anything to find out the exact RPM, but just looking at the tachometer, it seems like it's right around RPM. So you'll start it up. When it's in fast idle, it runs fairly smooth. You get those vibrations while the engine's starting, but you expect that. And then as it sort of settles under 1,000 RPM, vibrations will get bad for a few moments, and then once the engine's fully warmed up and the idle settles down to around 600 RPM or so, it's great, very smooth. You notice a little vibration when you're spinning the engine up to take off, but it's nothing that, you know, is intolerable. If that was all I had to worry about, I'd be very happy with this motor mount. The thing that you run into is anytime you run the AC, it seems like the vehicle kicks up the idle speed in prep for the compressor to kick in, and it happens to kick the idle speed right up to around 800-900 RPM, right where that resonance is at. So whenever you're running the AC at idle, you know, this thing really shakes, rattles, and rolls, and I hope I'll be able to sort of illustrate that for you. Go ahead and just start it up and jump right into this. So it's kind of shaking a bit right now. I've got a cup of water here, and as the engine RPMs settle, we should see it. We should see the vibrations drop considerably. I'm going to take a few moments here to just let that happen so I can fully illustrate this. Still fast idling at the moment, around 850-900 RPM. Probably should have started my car up ahead of time and let the engine warm up, so I didn't have to keep you guys waiting, but I didn't plan ahead. Okay, what I think I'll do is go ahead and show you with the AC, and then I'll shut the AC off at the end, and by then the engine should have heated up enough that the idle's settled. So take that as sort of a baseline. This is without the AC on, in a manual, about the worst that you're ever going to see in terms of vibrations, and this is perfectly tolerable in my mind. Now I'm going to kick the AC in, and you probably can't tell it from the video, but it really is vibrating considerably more. If I show you the cup, hopefully that illustrates the difference. So considerably more vibration. You can kind of see it in the rear view mirror too. I don't know how well that translates to video, but it is shaking around a bit. And I'm going to step out to the front of the car now and show you the front bumper. I mean, it's not just inside the cabin, it really is the whole car that's shaking. I don't know if you can see the fog light covers moving around there. This once again may or may not transfer to video as well as I'd like. My license plate cover bouncing around a bit. I think you can see that in the video, but it looks a little worse. You'll have to take my word, it looks a little worse in person. So there really is some considerable vibration with the AC running. If you watch the tach there, you can increase the RPM just a bit. It really does not take much. Right there, one click, and it's pretty smooth. You can see that I let the throttle off. You can see right there, it's pretty much settled. So I mean, another 50, 100 RPM maybe, and this would not even be an issue. But unfortunately, where the stock RPM is set, at least with the AC running, it's right in that resonance, and that resonance seems to be particularly bad when the compressor's kicked in, when there's a load on the engine. It's not that big a deal when the engine's just sitting there unloaded. So, personally, I enjoy a spirited drive every once in a while, but I don't really take this car to the track or anything like that. So I'm kind of on the fence whether or not I'm going to keep this motor mount. I like the way the car feels with it. It really shifts much nicer. I can't overstate that. I can't overstate how soft the stock motor mount is. But I'm also not fond of this issue, and it's not a huge deal to me. I don't run the AC that often, but there are some times when I do like to run it if I have other people in the car. You know, I like to run it for them, and certainly this would bother the average Joe more than it bothers me. You know, in the winter, if you run your defroster, the AC is going to kick in occasionally then. If you run your AC often at all, I really would not recommend this modification for you unless you've done other modifications to support this issue. If you are someone that takes your car to the track a lot, you know, this probably is going to have a lot of benefit for you. It shifts much more nicely. You know, I can't overstate that. So, you know, I do think that there's definitely a market for this device. I think it's a small market, but it's there. And if you're a guy like me that just enjoys a spirited drive every once in a while, it may or may not be for you. The good thing is you can pick these up pretty cheap, $130, $140. So you aren't in a lot of time and money. It's an easy installation. You aren't in a lot of time and money if you want to give it a shot. And I really, you know, other than the AC, I haven't noted any major issues. I'm going to keep trying this for another few weeks, you know, let it settle and break in and see how things feel. But, you know, right now I'm on the fence. Probably a 50-50 chance, so I either will or will not keep this motor mount. I may or may not go back to the stock. So my RPM has pretty much settled down to a normal idle speed at this point. And if you look at the cup, there's a bit of vibration there, but it's not too bad. Certainly not bad compared to kicking in the AC. AC's on now. So really a lot of vibration with the AC. If you have an automatic Mazda 3, that also puts some load on the engine when it's idling. So I gotta believe that you'd see a similar issue on the automatics with the AC on or off. I can't say from experience, that's just sort of speculation. I have given some thought to things that you might do to mitigate this issue. I believe I read either on a Mazda forums or on the CorkSport website. CorkSport sells a aluminum alloy crank pulley, and apparently that can improve vibration a bit. I'm somewhat skeptical of that claim because I've assumed, I don't know, but I've assumed that the stock steel pulley has a built-in harmonic balancer and the aluminum pulley does not. So whether the improvement of having less rotational mass makes up for the fact that the harmonic balancer isn't there with the aftermarket part, you know, I don't know. You could speculate. I probably won't throw any money at trying to find that out. If you were actually building a vehicle for, you know, track purposes and you were tearing the engine completely down, you could have it precision balanced, and you know, it's possible that this issue might go away or at least mitigate. So that's you know, that's potentially an option. But if you didn't already have the engine in pieces, it'd be really expensive to do that. So I can't, you know, I certainly am not going to be attempting that. And the other thing that occurred to me is, at least with the manual model, I can't speak for the automatic, but all I'd really have to do to get rid of this issue is raise the idle by, you know, 50 or 100 RPM. And the only way you can do that is to reprogram the ECU. But for some of you that are already running custom maps, that would be a pretty simple process. So if you have a custom map on your Mazda 3, all it might take to smooth things out a little bit would be to take that engine RPM for the AC when the AC is running and just raise that by 50 or 100 RPM. And I imagine, I've not, you know, tried it, I imagine that any reputable tuning shop could do that. Personally, I probably won't throw any money at any of that. I'll probably either keep this motor mount or go back to the stock one. I'm just going to take some time to decide. I hope this has been useful to you. And like I said, if you're on the fence, it's really not expensive to purchase one of these motor mounts, and it's a fairly easy installation. Basic hand tools. The only thing that I really needed beyond what was in the instructions was a little bit of penetrating oil to break one of the bolts loose. So, I hope this has been useful. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you've got anything to add to this, by all means, leave it in the comments.